Parshas Pinchas teaches us one of the great principles of leadership. Here's the context. Moses by now knew he was not going to be privileged to take the people across the Jordan into the promised land. He also knew what happened when he wasn't there. The people made a golden calf. Even when he was there, they still rebelled in the days of Korach and others, and therefore the possibility of schism, once he died without a designated successor, was immense. And therefore, he made a prayer to God. May the Lord, the God who gives breath to all living things, appoint someone over the community to go out before them, to come in before them, one who will lead them out and bring them in. Let the Lord's people not be katzon asher ein lahem ro'eh, like sheep without a shepherd. And God duly chose Joshua, and Moses inducted him. However, I want to point at one detail in what Moses says. Can you see? He seems to be saying the same thing twice. He says, appoint a leader to go out before them, to come in before them, one who will lead them out and bring them in. Is that not saying the same thing twice? What is the answer? This is one of those Torah problems that you only really learn the answer to in real life. One of the arts of leadership, and it is an art, not a science, is a sense of timing, of knowing what is possible when. And sometimes you just can't do something now that you can at some other times. So here you are in 1981. There was a threat of the coal miners' strike. Margaret Thatcher knew that the country had very limited supplies of coal, and she couldn't survive a prolonged strike. So she gave in very quickly. Immediately afterwards, and very, very quietly, she ordered coal stocks to be built up until there were huge supplies. The next time there was a miners' strike in 1984, she knew she had enough coal reserves to resist the miners, and after many weeks of strike action, they conceded defeat. The miners may have been right both times. They may have been wrong both times. But in 1981, the Prime Minister knew she couldn't win. In 1984, she knew she could. Now, a much more difficult challenge happens when it's not people, it's not the facts, but it's people who have to change. Human change is very slow. And Moses discovered this in the most dramatic way through the episode of the spies. An entire generation lost the chance of entering the promised land because they were born in slavery. They lacked the courage and independence of mind to face a prolonged struggle. And that was going to take a new generation born in freedom. So the question is, how far do you go and how fast? And the short answer is, if you don't challenge people, you're not a leader. But if you challenge them too far, too fast, then disaster happens. First, there's dissension. People start complaining. Then there are challenges to your leadership. Then the challenges get louder and louder and more dangerous, and eventually there will be a rebellion or worse. Here's a story, true story. It begins on the 13th of September 1993. On the lawn of the White House, Yitzhak Rabin, Shimon Peres, and Yasser Arafat shake hands and sign a declaration of principles intended to carry them forward to a negotiated peace. You know, Rabin's body language that day, if you've ever seen the film, made it clear he had many qualms, but he continued to negotiate. And meanwhile, month by month, public disagreement within Israel grew. Two things happened in the summer of 1995. There was increasingly vituperative language within Israel between the different factions, and there were several public calls to civil obedience suggesting that students studying serving in Israel, in Tzahal, in Israel's defense forces, should actually disobey army orders if they were commanded to evacuate settlements as part of the peace process. Now, whenever you hear calls for soldiers to disobey orders, you know you are in a very, very dangerous situation. It's a sign of a breakdown. between the government and a section of society. Violent language in the public arena is also a danger signal. And so we knew things, everyone knew, I think, things were at a high point of tension. At the end of September 1995, I published an article in the press fully supporting Yitzhak Rabin in the peace process. But at the same time, privately, I wrote to him, urging him to spend more time negotiating with Jews than with Palestinians, because at that moment, that was the great imperative. He was in danger, and he was in danger from his fellow Jews. The weeks went by, I didn't hear from him. Then on Motzei Shabbat, 4th of November 1995, we heard the news. Rahman al-Itzlan, he had been assassinated. I went to the funeral in Jerusalem. The morning after the funeral, Tuesday 7th of November, I went to the Israeli embassy to pay my condolences to the Israeli ambassador in London, who hadn't been able to be at the funeral because he was dealing with the media here. And as I came in, he handed me a letter. He said, "This has just arrived for you." We opened it and we read it together in silence. A beautiful letter. One of the last letters he ever wrote to me, replying to my letter, expressing eloquently his commitment to peace. We have it framed on the walls of our office to this day. But it was too late. And that is the hardest leadership challenge of all. Because when times are normal, change can come slowly. But there are situations in which leadership involves getting people to change, and that's something they resist, especially when they experience change as a form of loss. Great leaders are visionaries. They see the need for change, but not everyone else does. People cling to the past. They feel safe the way things are. They see the new policy as a form of betrayal, and that is why some of the greatest of all leaders were assassinated. Abraham Lincoln, Gandhi, John F. Kennedy, Robert Kennedy, Martin Luther King, Anwar Sadat, and Yitzhak Rabin himself, all of them assassinated. A leader who fails to work for change is not a leader. But a leader who tries to generate too much change in too short a time will fail. And that is ultimately why neither Moses nor his entire generation, with only two exceptions, were destined to enter the land. It's all a problem of timing and pace. And there's no way of knowing in advance what is going to be too fast and what's going to be too slow. And that ultimately is what Moses meant right at the end when he said, "Give them a leader to go out before them and come in before them, one who will lead them out and bring them in." These are two completely different challenges. The first, go out before them, come in before them. A leader has to lead from the front. That is straightforward. But the second request, one who will lead them out and bring them in, means a leader who takes people with him or takes people with her. You can't be so far out ahead that when you turn around and look, nobody is following. And that is the challenge. It seems that at the very end of his life, Moses realized that he'd been impatient. He expected people to change faster than they could. And that's, in the end, the impatience that led him to hit the rock. He was angry with the people, and he forfeited his chance of leading them into the land. Leading from the front, all too often, he found people not willing to follow. And so he was saying to his successor, don't make that mistake. Go at the pace that they can come with you. Lead from the front. Go out before them and come in before them. But you've got to bring them with you. And that is the real challenge. Take people with you at the pace they are able to take. However, we should not take from this a sad message that Moses actually failed. The truth is, many great leaders seem in their lifetime to have failed. But in the end, they haven't failed. Their success comes when others complete what what they began. May we all lead, and may we bring people with us. Shabbat Shalom.